Hi, my name is Aaron Turner from One Thought. For the past 20 years, I've been working with a groundbreaking approach to well-being and clarity. And one of the fundamentals of my job during that time has been to show people their potential for well-being and clarity in circumstances in which they don't think it's possible or they think it's difficult. And so I know that a lot of us are struggling with our well-being and our resilience during lockdown. So I wanted to do a short video on the top 5 tips to have more well-being in lockdowns. So my first tip number 1, is knowing that well-being is always a possibility. And what's behind this tip is, if you have a potential for something, and we all have the potential for well-being in any circumstance, because well-being is from our mind, it's to do with our mind, and the things that get in the way of our well-being are to do with our mind. And we take the same mind into every circumstance that we walk into. So I know it doesn't seem like it, but we have the same potential for well-being and the same potential for suffering in every circumstance. So the biggest challenge in having more well-being in any circumstance, particularly the ones that you find challenging, is realizing that the possibility is there. It's possible to have well-being in any circumstance. So when I work with groups in difficult circumstances, people that are stressed or suffering, when I introduce the idea that well-being is possible in that circumstance, half the group are laughing because they think it's ridiculous, and half the group are angry because they think it's ridiculous. So the biggest challenge to having more well-being more easily in any circumstance is really considering that it's possible. Because when we're suffering and we've lost our well-being, it looks like it's not possible or it's more difficult. So tip number 1 is really consider that you have the potential for well-being in any circumstance. And what that means is, when you feel bad and you think that you have no ability or it will be difficult to feel better, you have to question it. And what that will do for you is it will make you feel less shut in, less victimized, and more hopeful. And there's good reason for that, because you have a potential for well-being. But like any potential, if you don't know it's there, you won't look for it, you won't find it, you just resign yourself to whatever you're in. So just this first tip, considering you always have the potential for well-being, should take some of the weight and victimization out of your experience of suffering. Tip number 2, don't be tricked. When we lose our well-being, our feelings of distress and stress and suffering get stronger, and the way we see life feeds into those feelings, and it's like a vicious loop. Now we try to get out of it, but it's like one of those Chinese finger traps. The more you pull it, the harder it is to get out. So tip number 2 is, take the way that you're feeling, take the way that you're thinking, take the way that things look with a pinch of salt. So if you feel down, try to consider that it's just a function of losing your well-being. It's a cloud in your mind. It's your state of mind that's making you feel that way. Take it with a pinch of salt. Don't treat it as real, because as soon as you treat it as real, you start listening to the very thinking that's making you feel bad, and you get locked in. Taking your thoughts and reality the way you see it when you feel bad with a pinch of salt will start to release you from the compulsion of suffering. Tip number 3. When we're suffering, it's very easy to focus on it because it's, as I said a minute ago, it's very compelling. Tip number 3, try not to get preoccupied. You'll notice that as we suffer about things, and you see it in the lockdown, we tend to think about it more. We tend to focus on it more, mostly because we want to get out of it. So tip number 3, try not to be preoccupied with it. You can think about it like this. If you have an itchy tag in your sweater, the more you focus on it, the more unbearable it becomes. When you don't focus on it and you're not preoccupied about it, you start to have other experiences, and sometimes you don't even notice how itchy that exact same tag is. So you'll notice that when people are suffering, they talk about it, they're preoccupied about it, they complain about it. Just start to see that that's happening. Tip number 3, do your best not to get preoccupied with the very feeling that you're trying to get away from. Tip number 4, and this is an interesting one that most people don't guess at. When we feel bad and lose our well-being, we try to correct it. We try to get away from it. In a way, when we start to feel bad because we don't like it, we get reactive to it. And tip number 4 is try not to get reactive, try to get comfortable. So if you can get comfortable feeling bad without getting preoccupied and then without treating it as real and knowing that you have the potential to feel better, you're going to start to see that it slides by more easily. So getting less reactive and uncomfortable with feeling bad and getting more comfortable and letting it kind of wash over you allows it to pass more easily. And the flip side of tip number 4 is tip number 5. Tip number 5 is see if you're willing to feel good. And I know that sounds funny, but sometimes when we're feeling bad and we lose our well-being, we can kind of get attached to it. And being open and willing to feel better, to let ourselves feel better, to lose track of how we feel, and to feel comfortable feeling better when a moment before it seemed like we had all sorts of reasons for feeling bad. This is the least tangible tip, but in a way it's the most important. Being willing to feel different in the same circumstance. Being willing to feel good in the same circumstances in which you felt bad sometimes jars with people. But if you're willing to have that fluidity in your feeling, your mind's natural ability to self-correct and readjust and allow you to feel better can kick in more easily. So kind of being a bit more neutral about how you feel. So those are my immediate, quick top 5 tips for feeling better in well-being. And the key to them all is starting to take your feelings of suffering as if they're more passing thoughts than related to circumstance and real. Starting to get comfortable having them, but not getting locked into them, not buying into them, not getting preoccupied with them, and letting them kind of come and go more easily. So your mind's natural well-being and resilience has a chance to kick in.